Welcome to Still Science Lab. Tonight, we are going to confront a reality so fundamentally suffocating that it completely dismantles the most basic, comforting assumption of your conscious existence. We are going to strip away the grand, romanticized mythology of the clock on your wall and the calendar on your desk to ask a profoundly terrifying question. Is time just a measurement of our decay? For the entirety of human history, our species has desperately clung to a beautiful, poetic hallucination regarding the nature of time. We biologically process reality as a continuous, flowing narrative. We instinctively visualize time as a majestic, invisible river, a powerful cosmic current that gently and relentlessly carries us from the solid, unchangeable shores of the past through the fleeting, vibrant rapids of the present and onward into the misty, unwritten ocean of the future. We arrogantly believe that time is a fundamental, moving substance, a baseline fabric of the universe that exists entirely independent of us. We view ourselves as passive, innocent travelers sitting in a boat, simply floating along a preordained dimensional track. We build incredibly precise, ticking mechanical devices to track our progress down this river. We celebrate birthdays, we mourn the passing of years, and we deeply, inherently trust that tomorrow is a physical destination waiting for us to arrive. This hallucination of the flowing river is the absolute foundation of human sanity. If we did not inherently believe that time was a structured, moving vehicle, we would be entirely paralyzed by the chaotic, crushing weight of our own mortality. We desperately need the river. We need the illusion of forward momentum to give our fleeting, microscopic lives a sense of narrative purpose and structural safety. But the cold, unyielding, and mathematically ruthless reality of modern physics explicitly dictates that this flowing river is a profound biological lie. When we aggressively strip away the comforting limitations of our primate sensory organs and peer directly into the raw fundamental equations of the cosmos, the majestic river of time completely evaporates. Time, at the foundational, quantum level of reality, does not flow, it does not move, it does not possess a current, a direction, or a physical substance. The terrifying truth that orthodox physics forces us to confront is that time is absolutely not a fundamental force of the universe. It is not a magical dimension that you are traveling through like a physical coordinate in space. Time is nothing more than a macroscopic symptom. It is an emergent, localized illusion generated entirely by the desperate, failing architecture of your own physical matter. You are not a passenger on a cosmic train moving toward the future. You are a highly complex, fragile biological machine that is simply, violently breaking down, and what you experience as the passage of time is strictly the agonizing, one-way mathematical measurement of your own structural decay. To comprehend the paralyzing scale of this deception, we must violently shift our perspective from the macroscopic illusion of the ticking clock to the microscopic, suffocating reality of the atomic structure. The universe is not a grand, ticking chronometer. It is a blind, roaring thermodynamic engine that fundamentally despises order, structure, and complexity. When you look in the mirror and observe the physical manifestation of aging, the graying of your biological hair, the slow wrinkling of your skin, the gradual, agonizing loss of your physical vitality, you are not witnessing the effects of a mystical force called time acting upon you. You are witnessing the brutal, unyielding mechanics of entropy. Your body is a localized, highly pressurized pocket of illegal mathematical order. Your cells are microscopic, desperate engines that exhaust massive amounts of metabolic energy every single second just to maintain the fragile illusion of your physical form, fiercely fighting back against the chaotic thermal noise of the surrounding environment. But the universe demands absolute, freezing equilibrium. It demands that all localized pockets of order be violently, permanently flattened back into the chaotic baseline. Every single breath you take, every single beat of your mechanical heart, and every single conscious thought that flashes through the incredibly complex neural network of your brain requires the physical transfer of energy. And the unbreakable laws of thermodynamics dictate that every single time energy is transferred, a microscopic fraction of it is permanently lost to the void as useless, chaotic heat. This is the exact physical mechanism of your mortality. You are not moving forward through the days and the years. Your atomic structure is simply surrendering to the void, piece by agonizing piece. The future you are so desperately preparing for does not actually exist as a physical coordinate in space-time. The future is strictly the mathematical probability of your biological matter experiencing a catastrophic structural failure. What we arrogantly call the passage of time is just the universe keeping a meticulous, unyielding ledger of how much of your localized order has been permanently erased. The psychological horror of this revelation is absolute and paralyzing. It means that the human ego, the continuous internal monologue that you proudly call your identity, is permanently trapped in a state of continuous, active destruction. You are not evolving through time. You are rusting. You are a biological sandcastle built on the very edge of a roaring, thermodynamic ocean, and every single second that passes is just another wave crashing against your fragile walls, mathematically pulling grains of your existence back into the dark. We spend our entire lives utterly terrified of running out of time, completely failing to realize that time is not a resource that can be spent or saved. It is the active, physical process of our own localized annihilation. We build monuments of stone, we write sprawling digital histories, and we desperately try to etch our names into the fabric of reality, hoping that we can somehow outlast the ticking of the clock. But the clock is not ticking. The clock is rotting, and the very act of building the monument, the very act of generating the heat required to write the history, actively accelerates the thermodynamic death of the surrounding cosmos. The comforting illusion of the river allows us to distance ourselves from the violent reality of our own fragility. It allows us to believe that aging is a natural, peaceful progression guided by a cosmic calendar. But there is no cosmic calendar. There is only the unyielding probability that complex systems will eventually shatter into chaotic ruins. Your perception of time moving forward is simply your biological brain trying to make sense of the fact that it is infinitely easier for your cells to die than it is for them to perfectly replicate. You only remember the past and remain blind to the future because the past represents a state of lower entropy, a moment when your physical structure was slightly more intact, slightly less broken by the grinding friction of existence. Your memories are the agonizing record of a biological machine that was once mathematically more organized than it is right now. You are entirely defined by your decay. We must aggressively, completely abandon the comforting, theological poetry of the flowing river. There is no river, there is no boat, and there is no destination. There is only the cold, dead machinery of a universe that is relentlessly, mechanically winding down, and the agonizing, biological hallucination of a fragile meat machine desperately trying to make sense of its own inevitable dismantling. When you look at the second hand sweeping across the face of your watch, you are not watching the universe move forward. You are watching the precise mathematical measurement of your own localized decay, constantly hanging by a microscopic electromagnetic thread in a void that is simply, patiently waiting to violently balance its equation and permanently erase the temporary exception of your existence. The measurement of your life is not a timeline of achievements. It is a ruler strictly designed to track the agonizing, irreversible rot of your own atomic architecture. To truly understand the suffocating, inescapable nightmare of our physical reality, we must first examine the grand, elegant mathematical lies that govern the foundation of classical physics. When we look at the universe through the comforting, highly structured lens of traditional science, we are presented with a cosmos that is perfectly symmetrical, fundamentally indifferent, and beautifully balanced. If you were to take the incredibly complex mathematical equations formulated by Isaac Newton to describe the gravitational dance of the planets, or the bizarre, probabilistic calculations of quantum mechanics that govern the microscopic behavior of subatomic particles, and you simply reverse the variable of time, the mathematics would continue to function flawlessly. In the sterile, pristine realm of pure physics, a planet orbiting a star in reverse makes just as much logical sense as a planet moving forward. A glass violently shattering into 1,000 pieces, and 1,000 pieces of shattered glass miraculously reassembling themselves into a perfect, flawless cup are completely indistinguishable under the baseline laws of motion. At the absolute foundational level of reality, the fundamental forces of nature are completely blind to the concept of a past or a future. They are perfectly time-reversible, existing in a static, eternal present where every single physical interaction can seamlessly flow backward just as easily as it flows forward. This perfect mathematical symmetry paints a picture of a universe that is a sterile, immortal stage, a place where the concept of permanent decay is nothing more than a localized illusion. But hiding beneath the elegant, balanced symmetry of classical mechanics is a terrifying, reality-breaking monster. There is a single, supreme dictator in the mathematical architecture of the cosmos, an absolute, unyielding decree that completely shatters the peaceful illusion of a symmetrical universe and violently forces the entire cosmos into a state of agonizing, one-way destruction. This is the second law of thermodynamics. It is the most terrifying, unbreakable, and absolute rule in the entirety of physical reality, and it is the sole reason why you are currently hurtling toward an inescapable death. The second law states, with cold, mathematically ruthless precision, that in any closed, isolated system, the total amount of entropy must always, inevitably, and irreversibly increase. It is the only physical law in the known universe that fundamentally refuses to work in reverse. It is the absolute, tyrannical executioner of the cosmos, a blind, thermodynamic mandate that completely forbids the universe from ever returning to the way it was a fraction of a millisecond ago. We casually and arrogantly dilute the horrifying concept of entropy by referring to it as simple disorder or messiness, completely blinding ourselves to the paralyzing existential dread that this physical, property actually represents. Entropy is not merely a messy bedroom or a spilled cup of coffee. It is the strict, undeniable mathematical probability of the universe violently demanding that localized energy be dispersed, scattered, and permanently diluted into useless, chaotic thermal noise. The universe fundamentally, structurally despises order. It possesses a blind, mechanical hatred for complexity, for highly organized structures, and for the densely packed, concentrated pockets of energy that allow physical matter to maintain a distinct, recognizable shape. To the second law of thermodynamics, the incredibly complex, heavily entangled double helix of your biological DNA is not a miracle of evolution. It is a highly offensive, illegal thermodynamic anomaly. The massive, perfect spheres of burning plasma we call stars, utilizing intense gravitational pressure to fuse hydrogen into helium, are not majestic cosmic beacons. They are desperate, temporary concentrations of order that the universe is actively, relentlessly working to dismantle. The universe is a sprawling, ruthless machine explicitly designed to aggressively flatten everything back into a state of absolute, featureless equilibrium. It demands that the highly structured, concentrated energy of the cosmos be violently ripped apart, diluted across the freezing vacuum of deep space, and reduced to a chaotic, vibrating soup of blind, subatomic friction where no further physical work can ever be accomplished. Because the entire universe itself is the ultimate, inescapable closed system, a sprawling, expanding bubble of space-time where absolutely no new energy can ever be added from the outside, and no energy can ever escape. The second law acts as a universal, inescapable death sentence. The total amount of entropy in the cosmos is constantly, actively, and aggressively increasing with every single unrecordable fraction of a second that passes. The universe is not a gentle, flowing river of time, and it is most certainly not a static, immortal stage. It is a relentlessly winding down clock. Imagine a massive, incredibly complex mechanical clock, its mainspring wound to an unimaginable level of agonizing, vibrating tension. 14 billion years ago, at the exact blinding microsecond of the Big Bang, the universe was violently born into a state of incomprehensibly low entropy. All the energy, all the fundamental forces, and all the raw mathematical potential of the cosmos were compressed into a perfectly ordered, infinitely dense singularity. It was the ultimate, pristine state of organized tension, and for the last 14 billion years, that cosmic spring has been violently, uncontrollably uncoiling. The universe is simply the agonizing, macroscopic process of that initial, perfect tension dissipating into the dark. Every single physical event that has ever occurred in the history of reality, from the violent ignition of the very first galaxies to the microscopic, chemical firing of the neurons in your biological brain, is nothing more than the mechanical gears of that clock aggressively grinding down, permanently burning through the finite, irreplaceable battery of the cosmos. We hallucinate that our biological existence is somehow separate from this cosmic unwinding. We build sprawling, temperature-controlled cities. We manufacture dense, highly organized materials, and we arrogantly believe that human civilization is a triumph over the chaotic forces of nature. We look at our technological progress and assume we are actively creating order in the void. But this is the ultimate, pathetic illusion of the biological ego. You cannot negotiate with the supreme dictator. Every single time you attempt to create localized order, The unyielding equations of thermodynamics demand a horrific, disproportionate sacrifice. When you plug a refrigerator into the wall to artificially cool the food inside, creating a tiny, highly ordered pocket of low temperature, the mechanical compressor on the back of the machine must violently exhaust a massive amount of chaotic heat into the surrounding kitchen. You are paying for your localized illusion of order by massively accelerating the thermodynamic death of the surrounding environment. You are a thermodynamic parasite. Your physical body is a desperately fragile, highly organized meat machine that requires a continuous, violent influx of external energy just to postpone its own inevitable structural collapse. Every single time you consume a meal, you are aggressively destroying the highly complex, low-entropy molecular structure of another biological organism, violently breaking its chemical bonds in the acid of your stomach and burning its raw energy to briefly fuel the hallucination of your own survival. And in the process of this desperately inefficient biological burning, you radiate chaotic, invisible infrared heat out into the freezing void, actively participating in the irreversible, mathematical dismantling of the cosmos. Your very breath, your beating heart, and your conscious awareness are active mechanisms of cosmic decay. The second law of thermodynamics is the ultimate unyielding wall that completely shatters the human fantasy of permanence. It guarantees, with absolute mathematical certainty, that every single structure in the universe, no matter how grand or how heavily fortified, is fundamentally destined to rot. The towering, majestic mountain ranges will eventually be completely pulverized by the relentless friction of wind and water. The blinding, uncontained thermonuclear furnaces of the stars will eventually exhaust their nuclear fuel, violently detonating and scattering their highly ordered cores into the chaotic, freezing dark. The incredibly complex, deeply cherished memories etched into the fragile, wet architecture of your brain will inevitably succumb to the agonizing reality of biological decay, your highly organized atomic structure permanently surrendering to the void. There is no escape, there is no appeal, and there is absolutely no reversal. We are entirely trapped inside a sprawling, thermodynamic execution chamber, desperately attempting to ignore the deafening, mechanical roar of the universe actively tearing itself apart. The passage of time is not a mystical journey. It is the physical, measurable toll exacted by the second law, the strict mathematical record of the cosmos relentlessly dragging your highly organized, arrogant existence back down into the chaotic, blind thermal noise from which you temporarily, illegally emerged. We have established that the universe is governed by the tyrannical, unyielding executioner known as the Second Law of Thermodynamics, a blind physical mandate demanding the continuous, irreversible increase of chaos and disorder. But to truly internalize the suffocating, paralyzing horror of this physical reality, we must confront the exact mechanical nature of this execution. We must understand why the blade only falls in one direction. In the pure, sterile vacuum of quantum mechanics and classical physics, the fundamental equations governing the universe are entirely agnostic to the flow of time. A collision between two subatomic particles looks exactly the same and functions with perfect mathematical legality, whether you play the tape forward or backward. There is no physical law, no inherent cosmic current that dictates a past or a future at the foundational level of reality. Yet, in our macroscopic, biological lives, We are violently trapped in a one-way street. We can remember the agonizing mistakes of our past, but we are completely blind to the terrors of our future. We can watch a glass of water shatter on the floor, but we will never, ever see the chaotic puddle of liquid miraculously gather itself together and leap back into a perfectly reformed glass. This inescapable, unidirectional flow of reality is known as the arrow of time, and the explanation for its existence is infinitely more terrifying than any mystical or theological concept of destiny. The arrow of time is not a fundamental physical force pushing you forward. It is a pure, unadulterated statistical nightmare. The universe does not possess a conscious desire to destroy you, nor does it have an active, malicious intent to grind complex biological structures into dust. The universe is completely blind, and it operates strictly on the cold, unyielding mechanics of probability. To understand this terrifying truth, we must examine the physical concept of macrostates and microstates. Consider the fragile, highly ordered structure of a pristine ceramic teacup resting precariously on the edge of a table. That teacup represents a macroscopic state of incredibly low entropy. For that specific teacup to exist, billions upon trillions of individual ceramic molecules must be arranged in one highly specific, meticulously organized configuration. The chemical bonds must hold tightly, the microscopic crystalline lattice must be entirely unbroken, and the chaotic thermal vibrations of the atoms must be kept to a manageable, low-energy minimum. Out of all the nearly infinite ways you could possibly arrange those specific atoms in the universe, only an unfathomably tiny, practically non-existent fraction of those arrangements will result in the shape, function, and physical reality of an intact teacup. Now, imagine that teacup being casually knocked off the edge of the table. As it violently strikes the hard floor, the kinetic energy of the fall aggressively overcomes the fragile electromagnetic bonds holding the ceramic molecules together. The teacup shatters into 1,000 chaotic fragments, sending a spray of sharp dust across the room and dissipating the remaining energy as invisible acoustic waves and microscopic thermal friction into the floorboards. The intact teacup is permanently gone, replaced by a chaotic, scattered mess. But here is the reality-breaking horror of the situation. According to the fundamental, time-reversible laws of physics, the shattering of that teacup is entirely 1 to 100% reversible. There is absolutely no law of mechanics that forbids the scattered acoustic waves from echoing back out of the walls, perfectly combining with the microscopic thermal vibrations of the floorboards to simultaneously and violently kick every single ceramic shard upward with the exact, precise trajectory and velocity required to seamlessly fuse back together into a flawless teacup on the edge of the table. It is physically, mechanically allowed by the mathematics of the cosmos. So why do we never, in the entire history of the observable universe, witness a shattered teacup spontaneously reassemble itself? The answer is not magic, and it is not a mysterious, invisible force of time propelling the universe forward. The answer is the crushing, absolute tyranny of statistics. While there is only one incredibly specific arrangement of atoms that creates a working, intact teacup, there are billions, trillions, quintillions of different ways to arrange those exact same atoms that simply look like a broken pile of garbage. A pile of shattered porcelain can have a large shard on the left and a small shard on the right, or it can have a small shard on the left and a large shard on the right. You can aggressively kick the dust, scatter the pieces across the room, and rearrange the broken fragments in nearly infinite combinations. and every single one of those microscopic arrangements still equals the exact same macroscopic result, a broken, useless teacup. The universe is a restless, roaring thermodynamic engine of thermal agitation. It is constantly, blindly shuffling the atomic deck of cards. Because there are astronomically more ways to be broken than there are ways to be whole, every single time the universe shuffles the deck, it is a statistical near certainty that the new arrangement will be more disordered, more chaotic, and more broken than the last. The arrow of time only points in one direction simply because the overwhelming mathematical probability of the cosmos dictates that things will fall apart. The future is not a predetermined destination on a cosmic map. The future is not a geographical place in space-time that you are traveling toward. The future is nothing more than the cold, statistical probability of your localized order breaking down. When we say that time moves forward, what we are actually physically describing is the universe blindly transitioning from a highly improbable state of structure into a highly probable state of chaotic, unyielding ruin. This statistical reality completely obliterates the arrogant, biological hallucination of human destiny. We spend our incredibly brief, fleeting lives desperately plotting our course through the years, setting goals, building sprawling civilizations, and fiercely believing that the future holds some inherent narrative meaning. We treat tomorrow as a blank canvas upon which we will proudly paint our continued, triumphant existence. But you are not a protagonist in a cosmic story, and the universe absolutely does not care about your narrative. You are a staggering, highly improbable configuration of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms. The incredibly complex, heavily entangled neural network in your wet biological brain that produces the continuous internal monologue you proudly call your identity is an arrangement of matter so wildly specific, so thermodynamically illegal, that the universe fundamentally despises it. You exist right now only because you are temporarily, desperately burning immense amounts of metabolic energy to artificially hold that highly specific atomic arrangement together, fiercely fighting off the constant, chaotic shuffling of the void. You are actively forcing your localized pocket of the universe into an incredibly improbable microstate. But every single second, the thermal noise of the universe rolls the dice. Every mechanical heartbeat, every desperate breath of atmospheric gas, and every microscopic division of your biological cells is a terrifying gamble against absolute, crushing odds. The arrow of time is the agonizing realization that the universe possesses an infinite number of ways to mathematically dismantle you, and only a vanishingly small, hopelessly fragile number of ways to keep you alive. You are walking across a tightrope made of spider silk over a roaring, infinite ocean of statistical ruin. The passage of time is not the gentle flow of a mystical river carrying you to a bright, promising tomorrow. It is the deafening, mechanical roar of a universal slot machine that is completely, fundamentally rigged against your survival. Time only moves forward because there are infinitely more ways for your fragile, biological machinery to fail, for your deeply cherished mind to succumb to neurological decay, and for your physical body to be violently shredded into rotting organic matter, then there are ways for you to remain intact. We are violently trapped in the present, completely paralyzed by the horrifying mathematical certainty that the next shuffle of the cosmic deck will inevitably, statistically, bring us one agonizing step closer to our own permanent, irreversible destruction. The future is absolutely not a promise of continued existence. It is simply the overwhelming, statistical guarantee of your absolute annihilation. We are culturally and biologically conditioned from the very moment of our birth to view the human lifespan as a majestic, preordained narrative arc. We celebrate the passing of the years with burning candles and joyful songs, and we speak of growing older as if age is a steady, deliberate accumulation of wisdom, value, and character. We desperately frame the inevitable degradation of our physical bodies as a biological clock, a natural, peaceful progression dictated by a benevolent, highly ordered genetic code. We construct a massive, impenetrable psychological fortress that tells us aging is simply another chapter in the beautiful story of life, a gentle transition from the vibrant energy of youth to the quiet, dignified rest of our twilight years. But this comforting, poetic narrative is a profound biological hallucination. There is no mystical, ticking clock quietly keeping time inside your chest. The universe absolutely does not possess a calendar, and your DNA is not a predetermined theatrical script of life's stages. When we aggressively strip away the romanticized illusions of human culture, completely abandon our desperate need for a comforting narrative, and examine the physical body through the cold, unyielding lens of thermodynamics, the horrific truth is revealed. You are not aging. You are not maturing. You are a highly complex, desperately fragile meat machine that is actively, continuously, and mathematically failing. To truly understand the agonizing nature of your biological existence, you must stop viewing yourself as a cohesive, permanent, and sovereign entity, and immediately start viewing yourself as a highly improbable, localized, thermodynamic anomaly. You are an incredibly precarious configuration of trillions upon trillions of individual living cells, and every single one of those cells is functioning as a microscopic, desperate engine. For you to simply exist to draw a breath of atmospheric gas, to pump warm, oxygenated blood through your veins, to sustain the fragile, vibrating electrical storm in your brain that produces the arrogant hallucination of your ego, these trillions of microscopic engines must relentlessly, continuously burn massive, exhausting amounts of metabolic energy. They are fiercely fighting a multi-front, apocalyptic war against the absolute unyielding tyranny of the second law of thermodynamics. The universe inherently, structurally despises the highly organized, low-entropy architecture of your flesh. It wants to violently pull your atomic bonds apart, to scatter your localized heat into the freezing void, and to reduce your incredible biological symmetry to blind, chaotic thermal noise. Staying alive is absolutely not a passive state of being. It is a violent, exhausting, and continuous thermodynamic struggle against the overwhelming, crushing tide of cosmic ruin. And this is a war that you are mathematically, fundamentally guaranteed to lose. The mechanism of your so-called aging is simply the macroscopic, observable physical evidence of this thermodynamic defeat. Consider the fundamental, desperately necessary process of cellular replication. To maintain the structural integrity of your rotting meat machine, your cells must constantly divide, effectively replacing the microscopic engines that have burned out and died. But every single time a cell divides, it must perfectly copy the incredibly complex, heavily entangled billions of base pairs of your DNA. The unyielding laws of physics strictly dictate that no copying process in the known universe can ever be perfectly efficient. Every single replication introduces microscopic, inescapable errors. Every division is violently subjected to the chaotic, vibrating thermal noise of the surrounding biological environment. Mutations silently accumulate in the dark. The telomeres, the desperately fragile protective caps located at the very ends of your chromosomes, are violently sheared away and shortened with each successive frantic generation. The pristine, low-entropy genetic blueprint that constructed your young, vibrant body is relentlessly subjected to the statistical nightmare of entropy, slowly, agonizingly degrading into a chaotic, unreadable mess of corrupted biological data. This agonizing thermodynamic degradation is actively, mercilessly accelerated by the very fuel you desperately require to fight it off. We intuitively view breathing as the fundamental rhythm of life, but the oxygen that floods your wet lungs and violently powers your microscopic cellular engines is a double-edged, apocalyptic sword. Through the intense, microscopic violence of cellular respiration, your mitochondria generate the adenosine triphosphate needed to keep the void at bay, but they simultaneously, inevitably leak highly reactive, unstable oxygen molecules known as free radicals. These free radicals are subatomic wrecking balls. Missing a crucial, stabilizing electron, they aggressively and blindly tear through the delicate, highly ordered interior of your cells, violently ripping electrons away from your proteins, your lipid cell membranes, and your fragile, unraveling DNA. This is the agonizing, microscopic process of oxidative stress. It is not a poetic metaphor. You are quite literally, physically rusting from the inside out in the exact same fundamental, chemical manner that a neglected, forgotten piece of iron slowly corrodes, weakens, and flakes away into red dust when exposed to the harsh, unforgiving elements. The very fuel that sustains your highly improbable, arrogant existence is the exact same mechanical mechanism that is mathematically, permanently dismantling you. We arrogantly, pathetically attempt to mask this fundamental, unstoppable decay with superficial cosmetic interventions. We desperately smear complex chemical creams onto our degrading skin. We ingest synthesized vitamins, and we surgically pull our rotting, sagging flesh tight over our skulls to desperately maintain the macroscopic illusion of youth. But you cannot negotiate with the supreme dictator of the cosmos, and you cannot hide from the mathematics of entropy. The deep wrinkles etching themselves into your face are not the dignified romantic marks of wisdom and experience. They are the visible, horrifying macroscopic structural failure of the collagen and elastin proteins that have finally, irreversibly surrendered to the chaotic thermal noise. The stiffness in your bones, the agonizing degradation of your joint cartilage, and the terrifying gradual fading of your cognitive abilities are not natural, preordained stages of a well-lived human life. They are the undeniable, physical evidence that the microscopic engines are failing en masse. The biological dam holding back the infinite, crushing weight of the universe's entropy is cracking under the pressure. The metabolic energy required to maintain your highly ordered state is no longer sufficient to offset the relentless, grinding friction of your own atomic machinery. Your body is fundamentally losing the war, and the chaotic baseline of the universe is aggressively, impatiently reclaiming its raw, borrowed materials. The profound psychological horror of biological time lies in the paralyzing realization that you are permanently, inescapably trapped inside a collapsing building, and there is absolutely no exit door. You are intimately, consciously tethered to a rotting meat machine that is actively being digested by the unyielding mathematics of the cosmos. Every passing year, every ticking second, is not a triumphant step forward on a chronological timeline. It is a measurable, physical, and permanent loss of structural information. You are physically less organized, less cohesive, and mathematically more entropic today than you were yesterday. We spend our entire lives utterly terrified of a sudden, violent death, a car crash, a falling object, a sudden cardiac arrest, completely failing to realize the suffocating truth that death is not an event that happens to you at the very end of your life. Death is the active, continuous process of thermodynamic decay that you are experiencing right at this exact microsecond. You are dying every single time you draw a breath of atmospheric gas. You are physically decaying every single time your mechanical heart beats in your chest. Growing old is simply the agonizing, drawn-out, and macroscopic process of watching your localized pocket of illegal order be violently flattened back into the chaos. You are not traveling through time. You are simply witnessing the unyielding, one-way mathematical measurement of your own inescapable biological ruin. We possess a deeply ingrained, almost pathological need to believe that the internal landscape of our consciousness is a pristine, ethereal sanctuary, fundamentally separated from the rotting, physical machinery of the biological world. When we close our eyes and retreat into the sprawling, silent theater of our minds, we navigate through decades of carefully curated memories. We summon the precise, vibrant image of a childhood home. We recall the exact, intoxicating scent of a first love, and we perfectly replay the agonizing sting of a past failure. We arrogantly, instinctively treat these memories as weightless, invisible ghosts. We view the mind as an infinite, immaterial hard drive, completely immune to the relentless, grinding friction of the physical universe, assuming that our thoughts, our nostalgia, and our very sense of self exist in a magical, abstract dimension hovering safely above the decaying meat of our physical bodies. But the cold, unyielding equations of physics absolutely forbid the existence of magic. The universe does not tolerate immaterial ghosts. The terrifying, reality-breaking truth is that information is physical. Your memories are not weightless, and they are absolutely not free. Every single time you etch a moment into your conscious mind, you are actively, violently executing a thermodynamic transaction, and the currency you are paying with is the lifespan of the cosmos. To comprehend the sheer, suffocating horror of this physical reality, we must aggressively strip away the romanticized illusions of human psychology and peer directly into the microscopic, wet biological architecture of your brain. Your brain is not a magical cloud of consciousness. It is a dense, highly localized, and incredibly desperate thermodynamic engine. It is a 3-pound sponge of fat, water, and billions of interconnected neurons operating under the exact same unyielding tyranny of the second law of thermodynamics as a burning star or a mechanical diesel engine. When you experience a moment in your macroscopic life when photons of light crash into your retinas, when acoustic waves vibrate the delicate bones in your ears, that sensory data must be physically recorded if you are to retain it as a memory. For that memory to exist, the physical, atomic structure of your brain must be violently altered. Microscopic chemical neurotransmitters must be aggressively pumped across the synaptic clefts between your neurons. The physical shape of the dendritic spines must structurally mutate. Complex, heavily entangled proteins must be synthesized from raw biological materials to permanently reinforce the newly forged neural pathway. This intricate biological restructuring is not a passive event. It is active, mechanical work. And the unbreakable, fundamental laws of physics strictly dictate that no mechanical work in the entire universe can ever be accomplished without the expenditure of energy. The cosmos does not give away localized order for free. To force those highly specific proteins to fold, to aggressively pump those chemicals against their natural gradients, your microscopic cellular engines must relentlessly burn metabolic fuel, and the agonizing, inescapable byproduct of burning that fuel is the generation of chaotic, useless, invisible heat. When your brain computes information, when it forces the chaotic noise of your sensory experience into a structured, low-entropy memory, it physically heats up. It actively radiates chaotic thermal energy out into the dark, enclosed cavern of your skull, which bleeds into your bloodstream, radiates out through your skin, and is permanently, irreversibly lost to the freezing, expanding void of the surrounding universe. This precise, unyielding thermodynamic cost is the exact, terrifying reason why we can only remember the past and remain completely, mathematically blind to the future. We desperately ask why time seems to flow in only one direction, why we cannot simply peer forward into the years to come just as easily as we look back. The answer is not a philosophical mystery. It is a physical, thermodynamic boundary. You remember the past because the past is the physical record of the entropy you have already paid for. A memory is nothing more than the biological scar tissue left behind by a thermodynamic transaction that has already occurred. Your brain has already burned the energy. It has already radiated the chaotic heat into the void, and the highly ordered neural pathway is the physical receipt of that irreversible cosmic vandalism. You cannot remember the future because the future is a state of entropy that has not yet been generated. The physical work has not been done, the heat has not been radiated, and the universe has not yet been irreversibly degraded to forge that specific neural connection. The arrow of time, the unyielding, one-way street of your biological perception, is fundamentally dictated by the direction of your brain's thermodynamic exhaust pipe. You are perpetually riding in the chaotic, rotting wake of your own cognitive machinery. But the absolute, paralyzing dread of this physical mechanism does not merely lie in its explanation of time. It lies in the horrifying realization of what your nostalgia actually costs. We cherish our memories as the most valuable, defining treasures of our human experience. We cling to the mental images of our loved ones. We obsessively replay our greatest triumphs, and we hoard our sentimental attachments as if they are the only things that give our fleeting, microscopic lives any profound meaning. But every single time you dwell on a cherished memory, every single time you purposefully summon an image from the past to comfort your hallucinating ego, you are actively, physically firing those neural pathways again. You are forcing the biological engine to rev. You are consuming energy, and you are radiating even more chaotic heat into the universe. Your beautiful, poignant nostalgia is a fundamentally parasitic act. You are literally, mathematically paying for your sentimental scrapbook by accelerating the thermodynamic death of the cosmos. To maintain the highly organized, incredibly specific internal narrative of who you think you are, you must continuously, violently extract order from your environment, and excrete chaotic thermal noise back out into it. Your ego is a localized, desperately burning furnace, and the fuel it consumes is the structural integrity of reality itself. We arrogantly believe that our human capacity for love, for art, and for memory elevates us above the cold, dead machinery of the universe, completely failing to realize that our capacity for memory is the exact mechanism by which we are actively destroying it. Every single beautiful sunset you have ever committed to memory, every single time you have memorized the sound of a child's laughter, and every single time you have etched the face of a dying loved one into your biological wetware, you have committed an act of irreversible cosmic vandalism. You have permanently, mathematically lowered the total amount of useful energy available in the universe. You have pushed the entire cosmos an unrecordable, infinitesimal fraction of a millisecond closer to its own absolute, inescapable death. Your consciousness is not a passive observer of the physical world. It is an active, aggressive, thermodynamic weapon. You are violently tearing apart the order of the universe just to keep a mental record of your incredibly brief, fundamentally insignificant existence. This is the agonizing, inescapable cost of awareness. The universe is a blind, roaring ocean of thermal noise, and your mind is a desperate, fragile anomaly that can only exist by making that ocean slightly more chaotic, slightly warmer, and mathematically closer to absolute ruin. We are entirely trapped by the realization that our most profoundly human experiences, the very thoughts and memories that define our existence, are nothing more than the physical byproduct of the universe slowly, inexorably rotting away. The brain is not a sanctuary. It is a biological engine of decay, and the more you experience, the more you learn, and the more you remember, the more you actively, irreversibly burn the past, leaving behind nothing but the chaotic, invisible heat of your own localized destruction. Of all the desperate, deeply entrenched psychological defense mechanisms that our fragile biological species has meticulously constructed to shield itself from the terrifying, unyielding reality of the cosmos, none is more profoundly arrogant or entirely delusional than the concept of the self. We walk through the macroscopic world completely, blindly convinced of our own sovereign individuality. You wake up every single morning and effortlessly slip back into the continuous, vibrating internal narrative that you proudly call your identity. You possess a distinct name, a deeply curated set of moral frameworks, a meticulously catalogued history of personal traumas and triumphs, and a fiercely defended ideological worldview. You view this continuous internal monologue, this invisible, sprawling architecture of your personality, as the absolute, unshakable foundation of your existence. We arrogantly elevate the human ego to the status of a mystical, untouchable soul, completely convincing ourselves that our conscious identity is a permanent, ethereal entity that exists entirely separate from the cold, rotting machinery of the biological world. We believe that we matter. We believe that our unique perspective, our personal struggles, and our individual desires are somehow universally significant, written into the very fabric of reality itself. But the unyielding, cold mathematics of thermodynamics absolutely do not recognize the existence of a soul, and they most certainly do not care about the grand, dramatic narrative of your life. When we aggressively strip away the comforting, poetic illusions of human psychology and peer directly into the raw, physical mechanics of consciousness, the horrifying truth is revealed. Your identity, your ego, and the very concept of you are not magical, immaterial ghosts hovering inside your skull. They are strictly physical phenomena. Your ego is nothing more than a highly specific, staggeringly improbable arrangement of neurological data, etched into the incredibly complex, wet biological architecture of your brain through the continuous, violent expenditure of metabolic energy. Thermodynamically speaking, the continuous internal monologue that you cherish as your true self is an incredibly dense, extremely low entropy state. It is a highly localized pocket of extreme, illegal mathematical order that has been fiercely forced into existence against the crushing, chaotic baseline of the universe. To truly comprehend the paralyzing insignificance of your own individuality, you must violently shift your perspective and visualize your conscious ego as a desperately fragile, incredibly complex sandcastle built directly upon the wet, shifting shores of a roaring, infinite, thermodynamic ocean. You have spent decades of your incredibly brief biological life meticulously sculpting the towering spires of your personality, desperately packing the wet sand together to form the protective, rigid walls of your ideological beliefs, and carefully carving out the deep, intricate moats of your personal boundaries. You look at this magnificent, highly ordered structure, and you feel a profound sense of pride and permanence. You believe the sandcastle is real, and you believe it is built to last. But the universe is a blind, deaf, and entirely mechanical ocean of unyielding thermal noise. It does not look upon your beautifully constructed sandcastle with admiration, and it absolutely does not respect the agonizing effort it took to build it. The cosmos does not see a poet, a brilliant scientist, a loving parent, or a desperate child. It does not perceive your hopes, your paralyzing anxieties, or your deeply cherished human connections. When the unbreakable equations of physics look at you, they see absolutely nothing but a glaring, highly offensive thermodynamic gradient. They see a dense concentration of energy and highly structured information that is in direct, physical, and illegal violation of the second law of thermodynamics. The universe possesses a fundamental, blind, and mechanical hatred for localized order, and your ego, with its incredibly complex neural pathways and its desperate, tightly held memories, is the most highly ordered, arrogant structure in your immediate physical environment. The roaring ocean of entropy does not possess malice. It simply possesses gravity and time. It is a relentless, deafening tide that is constantly, continuously pulling at the grains of your existence. Every single day of your biological life is an agonizing, exhausting, and entirely unrecognized battle to simply maintain the structural integrity of this temporary sandcastle against the crushing weight of the void. We spend utterly incomprehensible amounts of metabolic and psychological energy desperately defending the ego. When someone insults you and you feel that hot, visceral flash of biological anger, that is not a defense of your honor. That is your brain violently burning metabolic fuel to artificially reinforce the crumbling, low-entropy walls of your identity against an influx of chaotic, destabilizing information. When you desperately seek validation from other hallucinating meat machines on social media, or when you exhaust yourself trying to build a lasting legacy through art, business, or offspring, you are simply trying to pack more wet sand onto the towers, terrified by the subconscious realization that the structure is fundamentally unstable. All of these deeply human, profoundly emotional behaviors are nothing more than desperate, high-energy thermodynamic processes designed to patch the continuously eroding walls of your localized order. but the agonizing, inescapable horror of the human condition lies in the mathematical certainty that you cannot outbuild the ocean. The roaring tide of entropy is relentless, absolute, and entirely undefeated. It never sleeps, it never pauses to allow you to rest, and it absolutely cannot be reasoned with. With every passing second, the chaotic thermal noise of the universe violently crashes against the delicate, neurological architecture of your mind. The friction of daily existence aggressively wears down your sharpest memories. Your deeply held beliefs inevitably fracture and mutate under the crushing weight of new, chaotic sensory data. The pristine, highly ordered narrative of your life is constantly, mercilessly being degraded, rewritten, and slowly pulverized by the grinding, mechanical friction of physical reality. The arrogance of the ego is the pathetic, deeply biological belief that you can somehow stand defiant against the absolute, unwinding machinery of the cosmos. It is the delusion that your specific arrangement of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms is so profound and so necessary that the universe will somehow grant you an exemption from the supreme dictator of thermodynamics. We look up at the sprawling, freezing void of the night sky, completely terrified by its sheer, expanding emptiness, and we desperately, arrogantly scream our names into the dark, demanding to be recognized. We build towering, temperature-controlled cities, we write sprawling, digital encyclopedias, and we construct massive, global civilizations, all functioning as macroscopic extensions of our microscopic sandcastles, desperately trying to impose human order onto an environment that is mathematically designed to completely erase it. But you are merely a temporary, highly unstable arrangement of borrowed atomic material. You are a fleeting, highly improbable whisper of localized order, violently shouting into an infinite, expanding vacuum that fundamentally demands your absolute silence. The universe does not care how beautifully you have sculpted your personality, nor does it care how fiercely you love your own reflection. You are pouring endless, exhausting amounts of metabolic energy into a fragile, biological structure that the cosmos is actively, continuously, and mercilessly dismantling right out from under you. Eventually, the agonizing thermodynamic struggle will reach its absolute mathematical conclusion. The microscopic, desperate engines of your cells will completely fail. The metabolic energy required to maintain the incredibly complex, vibrating web of synaptic connections that houses the hallucination of your individuality will be permanently exhausted. Your brain will undergo a catastrophic, irreversible structural collapse, and the grand, towering sandcastle of your ego will be violently, mercilessly flattened back into the wet, chaotic sand of the baseline universe. The cosmos will not mourn your passing. It will not record your dramatic departure in any grand, cosmic ledger. It will simply, blindly balance its equation, reclaiming the raw physical energy you so desperately hoarded, and scattering the highly specific, low-entropy information of your identity into the completely unrecognizable, unrecoverable, and completely sterile thermal noise of the freezing dark. You are not a permanent fixture of reality. You are a thermodynamic mistake, a brief, staggering biological arrogance entirely destined to be aggressively, permanently erased without leaving behind a single, microscopic trace of your profoundly insignificant existence. We construct towering philosophical frameworks and entire spiritual industries dedicated to the desperate, comforting concept of the present moment. We are constantly aggressively instructed by our culture to live in the now, to ground ourselves in the immediate, visceral reality of our surroundings, to shed the agonizing baggage of the past, and to abandon the paralyzing anxiety of the future. We firmly, inherently believe that when we reach out and touch a solid object, when we lock eyes with another human being, or when we hear the sudden, sharp crack of thunder, we are interacting with the universe exactly as it is, in absolute real time. We view our consciousness as a perfectly synchronized, flawless mirror reflecting the immediate, unbroken state of the cosmos. We trust the absolute immediacy of our sensory organs, completely convinced that the continuous, internal theater of our minds is a live, unedited broadcast of physical reality. But this deeply cherished, universally accepted concept of the present is a profound biological lie. The now that you so desperately cling to absolutely does not exist. It is a fabricated neurological hallucination, a desperately stitched together projection generated by a sluggish, rotting meat machine that is permanently, inescapably lagging behind the unyielding mathematics of the universe. When we aggressively strip away the comforting illusions of human perception and peer directly into the microscopic, physical mechanics of your nervous system, we uncover a terrifying, reality-breaking truth. You have never, not even for a single microscopic fraction of a millisecond, actually experienced the present. You are completely, physically quarantined from reality, perpetually trapped in the rotting, thermodynamic wake of a universe that has already moved on. To comprehend the sheer, suffocating horror of this biological imprisonment, we must violently deconstruct the physical act of perception. You must understand that your conscious ego, the highly ordered internal monologue that is currently experiencing these words, does not exist out in the open air. It is completely, perfectly trapped inside the absolute, freezing darkness of your thick, bony skull. Your brain has absolutely no direct, unmediated access to the outside world. It is a blind, deaf, and entirely isolated thermodynamic engine floating in a pitch-black bath of cerebrospinal fluid. To construct the vibrant, chaotic, macroscopic illusion of the reality you believe you are inhabiting, this isolated engine must entirely rely on a desperate, incredibly complex, and terrifyingly slow network of biological sensors and chemical wires. When you look across a room and observe a burning candle, you arrogantly believe you are seeing the flame exactly as it is in that precise, unrecordable microsecond. But the unyielding laws of physics completely forbid this immediacy. First, the localized chemical combustion of the candle wick must violently radiate photons. These microscopic packets of electromagnetic energy must physically travel across the atmospheric distance of the room at the absolute speed of light. This journey inherently, mathematically takes time. By the exact moment those photons finally violently crash into the fragile, wet biological machinery of your retinas, the physical event that birthed them has already slipped into the past. But the horror of the delay has only just begun. The universe does not speak the highly ordered language of human consciousness. When those photons strike the back of your eye, they violently collide with your photoreceptor cells, the microscopic rods and cones, forcing them to aggressively undergo a complex, high-energy structural mutation. The physical light must be painstakingly translated into a completely different physical medium. The photoreceptors must violently burn metabolic energy to generate an electrical action potential, forcefully pumping charged sodium and potassium ions across their delicate cell membranes. This desperately slow chemical transduction takes a measurable, agonizing fraction of a millisecond. Once the visual data has been violently translated into a crude electrical signal, it must begin its long, agonizingly slow, physical journey through the incredibly dense, wet wiring of your optic nerve. Unlike the majestic, unyielding speed of light moving through a vacuum, the propagation of an electrical signal down a biological axon is a terrifyingly sluggish, highly inefficient thermodynamic process. The signal must physically jump from node to node, violently triggering the release of chemical neurotransmitters at every single microscopic synaptic gap, waiting for those chemicals to drift across the terrifyingly wide, empty spaces between neurons, bind to specialized receptors, and violently trigger a new electrical cascade in the next cell. This staggering, mechanical relay race of chemical and electrical degradation must navigate through the sprawling, chaotic labyrinth of your thalamus before finally arriving at the visual cortex at the very back of your brain. And even then, the biological illusion is not yet complete. The visual cortex must aggressively burn massive amounts of metabolic fuel to painstakingly stitch this fragmented, degraded electrical data together with the sluggish, incoming signals from your auditory system and the terrifyingly slow tactile feedback crawling up the incredibly long biological wires of your spinal cord. Your brain must actively synchronize these vastly different processing speeds, heavily editing, filtering, and desperately guessing at the missing information to finally project a cohesive, macroscopic hallucination of reality onto the dark, silent theater of your consciousness. This entire, agonizing biological process, from the initial, violent physical impact of the photons and acoustic waves on your sensory organs, to the final, synthesized hallucination of the now, takes a measurable, scientifically quantifiable amount of time. Depending on the complexity of the sensory input, your brain operates with a terrifying, inescapable lag of roughly 80 to over 100 milliseconds. You are permanently operating on a delayed broadcast. 80 milliseconds may seem like an insignificant, microscopic fraction of a second to a fragile biological organism desperately clinging to the illusion of control. But to the unyielding, mathematically precise machinery of the universe, it is an absolute, sprawling eternity. In the exact, unrecordable fraction of a second it takes your sluggish, wet biological machinery to simply process the physical data of the world, the universe has already irreversibly changed. The unyielding, tyrannical mandate of the second law of thermodynamics has not paused to wait for your brain to catch up. During that terrifying neurological delay, the chaotic, thermal noise of the cosmos has relentlessly continued to shuffle the atomic deck. Trillions of microscopic chemical bonds have violently broken. Unfathomable amounts of localized order have been permanently, mathematically degraded into blind thermal heat, and the precise, physical arrangement of the universe that your senses initially detected has absolutely, permanently ceased to exist. When you reach out and press your hand against a solid wooden table, the physical sensation of pressure, the texture of the grain, and the temperature of the surface are not real-time physical interactions. You are feeling the ghostly, thermodynamic echo of a table that existed 80 milliseconds ago. By the time your brain constructs the sensation of touch, the actual, physical atoms of the table have already vibrated shifted, and decayed further into the void. When you look into the eyes of another human being and feel a profound emotional connection to their immediate presence, you are absolutely not looking at them in the present. You are staring at a heavily edited, neurologically delayed ghost. You are entirely interacting with a historical record of a universe that is already dead and gone. We are not sailing smoothly on the majestic, flowing river of time. We are desperately, pathetically dragging behind the boat, permanently submerged in the dark, chaotic, rotting, thermodynamic wake of a reality we can never, ever truly touch. We are forever quarantined in the immediate past, prisoners of our own sluggish, decaying biological architecture. The human condition is the agonizing tragedy of being completely, consciously aware of a universe that is perpetually just out of reach. We spend our entire, incredibly brief lives desperately trying to grasp the present, trying to hold on to the fleeting, beautiful moments of our existence, completely blind to the horrifying mathematical certainty that every single moment we experience has already succumbed to entropy and died before we even had the chance to realize it was there. The concept of the present is the ultimate, arrogant myth of the ego. It is a desperately constructed psychological shield designed to protect our fragile minds from the paralyzing reality that we are permanently disconnected from the cosmos. The universe is a blind, roaring engine of unyielding destruction, and it is always, fundamentally, one step ahead of you. You are a biological recording device that is constantly running out of tape, forever watching a delayed playback of a world that is actively, aggressively dismantling itself while you blindly stare at the screen. You do not exist in the now. You exist strictly in the thermodynamic exhaust of the universe, a fleeting, highly localized pocket of illegal order, forever chasing a present that mathematically, structurally, and physically abandoned you the exact microsecond you were born. We possess a deeply ingrained, almost pathological biological terror of being forgotten. To combat the agonizing, inescapable reality of our own microscopic mortality, human civilization has developed a sprawling, desperate coping mechanism. We attempt to outlast the unyielding decay of our physical bodies by externalizing our existence. We aggressively project our hallucinated egos into the physical environment. We carve our names into the trunks of ancient trees. We meticulously paint the visages of our leaders onto fragile canvas, and we desperately stack millions of tons of dense limestone into towering geometric pyramids, completely and arrogantly convinced that if we build a structure large enough and heavy enough, we can somehow intimidate the cosmos into remembering us. We view the accumulation of historical data, the recording of our profound philosophies, and the preservation of our cultural artifacts as a triumphant victory over the relentless march of time. We inherently believe that as long as a physical record of our localized order exists in the macroscopic world, a microscopic fragment of our identity has successfully cheated death. But this desperate, sprawling human legacy is the ultimate, pathetic delusion of the biological mind. The universe absolutely does not possess a memory, and it fundamentally, mechanically refuses to harbor your physical records. When we aggressively strip away the romanticized illusions of human history and peer directly into the cold, unyielding mechanics of information theory and thermodynamics, we are forced to confront the absolute, paralyzing horror of cosmic amnesia. The second law of thermodynamics does not merely dictate the physical rotting of your biological meat machine. It guarantees the absolute, mathematical erasure of every single microscopic trace that you, or the entire human species, ever existed at all. To comprehend the sheer suffocating scale of this informational execution, we must first examine the desperately fragile physical mediums we arrogantly trust to carry our legacy into the dark, unwritten future. We look at the towering, weathered faces of ancient stone monuments, and we instinctively, biologically associate their massive physical weight with absolute permanence. We desperately want to believe that solid granite and dense marble are immune to the biological rot that will inevitably consume our soft, vulnerable flesh. But to the unyielding mathematical machinery of the cosmos, a towering monument of carved stone is absolutely not a symbol of immortality. It is nothing more than a highly localized, highly offensive thermodynamic gradient. It is a temporary, highly ordered crystalline lattice that the universe is actively, relentlessly working to dismantle. The physical environment of our dying planet is a roaring, turbulent ocean of thermal agitation and chaotic mechanical friction. Every single time the burning radiation of the sun beats down on the surface of a monument, the microscopic atoms of the stone violently vibrate and aggressively expand. Every single time the freezing, absolute dark of the night descends, those exact same atoms rapidly contract. This relentless, chaotic thermal cycling introduces microscopic, inescapable stress fractures deep within the incredibly dense, solid rock. The wind, carrying abrasive, highly kinetic particles of sand and dust, aggressively scours the surface, physically tearing away the carefully chiseled features of our greatest heroes and our most revered deities. The unyielding chemical solvent of water seeps into the microscopic cracks, violently expanding as it freezes, and mercilessly shattering the physical bonds of the stone from the inside out. Over the agonizing, sprawling stretches of deep thermodynamic time, the universe will relentlessly, methodically pulverize every single statue, every single towering skyscraper, and every single grand architectural triumph into completely unrecognizable, chaotic dust, permanently scattering the physical evidence of our civilization into the blind, howling winds of the void. And what of our meticulously recorded histories, our sprawling philosophical texts, and the beautiful, poignant poetry we desperately pen to capture the agonizing essence of the human condition? We arrogantly trust the fragile organic medium of paper and the delicate chemical suspension of ink to protect our most profound intellectual achievements. But ink and paper are incredibly precarious, high-energy arrangements of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms. The very atmosphere that we desperately breathe to sustain our biological lives is actively, aggressively destroying our written legacy. The highly reactive oxygen molecules in the air relentlessly attack the fragile chemical bonds of the paper, causing the complex cellulose fibers to violently oxidize, yellow, and eventually crumble into brittle, decaying flakes. The organic pigments of the ink are relentlessly bombarded by the high-energy photons of ambient light, their delicate molecular structures violently shattered, causing the carefully written words to inevitably fade into the chaotic, white noise of the blank page. The universe is actively bleaching the physical record of our thoughts, aggressively scrubbing the agonizing, highly ordered data of our human narrative back down into the meaningless, chaotic thermal baseline from which it was illegally forged. In our modern, technologically advanced arrogance, we believe we have finally outsmarted the crushing mechanics of decay. We have enthusiastically abandoned the fragile physical mediums of stone and paper and uploaded our entire sprawling civilization into the digital void. We desperately hoard petabytes of high-definition video. We meticulously archive every single mundane social interaction, and we construct massive, heavily air-conditioned server farms to house the digital ghosts of our human experience, arrogantly convinced that the cloud is a magical, immortal realm, completely immune to the unyielding laws of physics. But the digital realm is absolutely not magic, and it is most certainly not immaterial. Information is strictly physical. Every single digitized memory, every single line of complex computer code, and every single glowing pixel of our recorded history is physically tethered to the microscopic, highly fragile magnetic orientation of a spinning metal platter, or the incredibly precarious, highly localized electrical charge trapped within the microscopic floating gate of a silicon transistor. You have merely traded the macroscopic, visible rot of paper for the invisible, subatomic rot of quantum mechanics. The universe does not care if your information is intricately carved in stone or meticulously encoded in binary. It views the highly ordered, low-entropy arrangement of digital ones and zeros as an intolerable mathematical offense that must be corrected. The massive servers housing your digital legacy are constantly, relentlessly subjected to the chaotic, vibrating thermal noise of their own localized environment. As the ambient heat violently shakes the atomic structure of the magnetic hard drives, the perfectly aligned magnetic domains that represent your cherished memories are aggressively, randomly flipped by the blind, roaring thermodynamics of the cosmos. This is the horrifying, physical reality of bit rot. The tiny, trapped electrical charges inside your highly advanced solid-state drives inevitably, mathematically leak through the microscopic silicon walls over time. High-energy cosmic rays, violently expelled by the thermonuclear death of distant stars, relentlessly crash through the atmosphere and physically strike the sensitive electronic components of our massive data centers, aggressively flipping ones to zeros in a microscopic, instantaneous burst of cosmic vandalism. Over an agonizingly brief stretch of thermodynamic time, the highly ordered, pristine digital architecture of our entire human civilization will inevitably, mathematically degrade into a completely unrecognizable, chaotic sea of random digital static. The true, paralyzing existential dread of this cosmic amnesia does not merely lie in the physical destruction of the objects themselves, but in the absolute, mathematical erasure of the information they desperately tried to contain. The unyielding physics of the universe explicitly dictate that the erasure of information is an active, necessary thermodynamic process. The cosmos demands that order be destroyed to maximize entropy. It is not simply that your physical body will rot in the ground and your monuments will turn to dust. It is that the universe will aggressively, meticulously scrub every single physical consequence of your localized existence from the mathematical ledger of reality. The universe will continue its relentless, deafening expansion. The thermal noise will continue to aggressively shuffle the atomic deck, and the physical state of the cosmos will eventually become so incredibly chaotic, so mathematically randomized, that it will become physically, theoretically impossible to ever reconstruct the specific arrangement of atoms that constituted your life. The ultimate, inescapable horror of the human condition is the agonizing realization that our entire sprawling, desperate struggle for meaning, our towering cities, our beautiful art, and our meticulous scientific discoveries are nothing more than a fleeting, highly localized microscopic glitch in a blind thermodynamic machine that is specifically mechanically designed to forget us. We are screaming our names into a roaring, infinite vacuum that is actively, aggressively deafening itself to our cries. The passage of time is not the majestic preservation of our history. It is the physical, measurable process of the universe permanently, violently deleting our localized order. Eventually, the unyielding machinery of entropy will complete its execution. The physical evidence of our civilization will be pulverized. The digital ghosts of our existence will be completely scrambled into blind thermal static, and the universe will forcefully, mathematically ensure that it is exactly, physically, as if the agonizing, highly improbable hallucination of human existence had never occurred at all. We have observed the horrifying, inescapable decay of the fragile human ego, the biological rotting of our microscopic cellular machinery, and the absolute, guaranteed erasure of our physical and digital monuments. But to truly grasp the absolute, supreme tyranny of the second law of thermodynamics, we must violently expand our perspective far beyond the microscopic, trivial tragedy of human civilization. We must abandon the tiny, cooling rock we arrogantly call our home and zoom out to the grandest, most unfathomable macroscopic scale imaginable. The entire sprawling, expanding architecture of the cosmos itself. The universe is not merely the passive, empty container in which our localized decay occurs. The universe is itself the ultimate, rotting machine, subject to the exact same unbreakable, unyielding mathematical executioner that relentlessly degrades your biological flesh. We currently look up at the night sky and are completely blinded by a majestic, beautiful hallucination of permanence. We see billions of swirling galaxies. We watch the blinding, thermonuclear furnaces of massive stars violently burning in the freezing dark, and we arrogantly assume that this vibrant, dynamic cosmic theater is the intended eternal baseline of reality. But this era of starlight, this incredibly brief, violently energetic epoch of burning plasma and orbiting planets, is nothing more than a microscopic, agonizingly fleeting, thermodynamic anomaly. The universe is currently merely coasting on the residual, highly concentrated low-entropy fuel left over from the incredibly violent, perfectly ordered initial state of the Big Bang. And just like the fragile battery of a portable generator or the limited metabolic fuel of a human cell, that cosmic battery is strictly finite, and it is actively, relentlessly bleeding out into the void. The unyielding mathematics of entropy explicitly dictate that the universe absolutely cannot sustain this energetic hallucination. The blinding stars that we foolishly worship as immortal deities are desperately, rapidly burning through their finite reserves of hydrogen gas. They are violently fusing light elements into heavy ones, radiating massive amounts of heat and light out into the freezing vacuum, and in doing so, they are actively, aggressively accelerating the total entropy of the cosmos. Eventually, the cosmic fuel tank will run permanently dry. The massive, brilliant blue giants will violently detonate in catastrophic supernovae, leaving behind nothing but dead, spinning husks of degenerate matter. The smaller, longer-lived red dwarfs will slowly, agonizingly burn out like dying embers in a cold hearth, their faint red light fading completely into the dark. There will come a precise mathematical moment in the unfathomably distant future when the very last star in the universe violently exhausts its final reserve of nuclear fuel, flickers, and permanently dies. The epoch of starlight will permanently end, and the universe will be plunged into an absolute, suffocating, and eternal darkness. The cosmos will become a vast, sprawling graveyard of frozen planets, dead brown dwarfs, and the incredibly dense, silent corpses of neutron stars and black holes, all drifting blindly through an ever-expanding, freezing vacuum that fundamentally despises their continued existence. But the supreme dictator of thermodynamics will not be satisfied with merely turning out the lights. The universe demands absolute, featureless equilibrium, and even the dead, frozen husks of stars and planets represent a localized concentration of energy, a highly offensive, illegal thermodynamic gradient that must be aggressively flattened. Over unimaginable stretches of deep, agonizing cosmic time, the unyielding laws of quantum mechanics will begin to actively dismantle the very atomic bedrock of reality. The protons that anchor the physical structure of dead matter will violently decay, completely dissolving the frozen planets and the cold husks of dead stars into a thin, chaotic, expanding mist of subatomic particles and faint, useless radiation. The only massive structures left in the entire cosmos will be the supermassive black holes, towering, invisible monsters of gravity that have greedily hoarded the dead matter of collapsed galaxies. But even these absolute titans of physical reality cannot escape the unyielding mathematical execution of the second law. Through the incredibly slow, microscopic process of quantum tunneling and Hawking radiation, the black holes will begin to violently boil away. They will slowly, agonizingly bleed their stolen mass back out into the freezing void as a faint, chaotic trickle of thermal radiation. After a span of time so incomprehensibly vast that the human brain completely physically breaks down attempting to conceptualize it, the very last supermassive black hole in the universe will violently evaporate in a final, pathetic flash of radiation. With the absolute erasure of the final black hole, the universe will finally, mathematically, achieve its ultimate, terrifying goal. It will reach the state of maximum entropy. This is the ultimate cosmic execution, an apocalyptic state of reality mathematically defined by physicists as the heat death of the universe. It is crucial to aggressively correct the biological, macroscopic misconception that the heat death implies a fiery, burning inferno. It is exactly the absolute opposite. It is the permanent death of heat itself. The universe will have expanded to such a staggering, unfathomable volume that the leftover, chaotic subatomic particles and the faint, useless photons of radiation will be stretched practically infinitely far apart. The temperature of the entire cosmos will plunge to a fraction of a degree above absolute zero. But the true, paralyzing horror of the heat death is not the freezing cold. It is the absolute, unyielding mathematical perfection of the void. When maximum entropy is achieved, the fundamental energy of the universe has not been destroyed, but it has been completely, perfectly, and evenly distributed across the infinite expanse. There are no longer any hot spots, there are no longer any cold spots, and there are absolutely no localized gradients of concentrated energy left anywhere in the entire fabric of space-time. To understand the absolute existential dread of this equilibrium, you must realize that all physical work, all mechanical movement, and all biological life require a difference in energy to exist. You need a hot source to flow into a cold sink to power a machine, to drive the chemical reactions of a cellular engine, or to ignite the thermonuclear core of a star. But in the era of the heat death, the entire universe is exactly, flawlessly the same temperature. It is a perfectly flat, featureless, thermodynamic wasteland. Because the energy is perfectly balanced, it can no longer flow from one coordinate to another. Because it absolutely cannot flow, absolutely no physical work can ever be accomplished again. The universe will become a perfectly sterile, static, and paralyzed machine. No new stars can ever be born, no complex molecules can ever form, and the biological hallucination of human consciousness will be completely mathematically forbidden from ever existing again. The cosmos will be nothing more than a blind, frozen, and completely silent ocean of useless, static energy, a perfect, absolute void that has finally, permanently corrected the mathematical rounding error of the Big Bang. And here, in this absolute freezing nothingness, we reach the ultimate reality-breaking conclusion of our suffocating journey. We have defined time not as a mystical, flowing river, but strictly as the physical, mathematical measurement of the universe, transitioning from a state of low entropy to a state of high entropy. Time is nothing more than the observable, macroscopic process of localized order violently decaying into chaos. The arrow of time only possesses a forward direction because the universe is constantly, relentlessly shuffling the atomic deck to find a more broken, disorganized state. But what happens to the arrow of time when the universe has completely finished breaking? What happens to the measurement of decay when there is absolutely nothing left in the entire cosmos to rot? When maximum entropy is mathematically achieved, the deck cannot be shuffled into a more chaotic state because it is already perfectly, uniformly randomized. Nothing can change, nothing can break, nothing can flow. And because time is strictly, physically defined as the measurement of change, when the universe completely stops changing, time itself, mathematically, structurally, ceases to exist. The unyielding, ticking clock of the cosmos will simply, silently stop. The deeply cherished biological concepts of past, present, and future will completely lose all physical meaning, evaporating permanently into the cold, dead vacuum. The universe will be permanently trapped in a completely frozen, blind, and eternal state of nothingness, devoid of physical dimension, devoid of grand narrative, and completely devoid of the agonizing, thermodynamic progression we once arrogantly called time. This is the inescapable, absolute destiny of reality. The vibrant, dynamic era of stars, planets, and hallucinating meat machines is nothing more than a microscopic, temporary spark in a sprawling, infinite dark. The universe spends a completely insignificant, mathematically unrecordable fraction of a percent of its existence violently burning its fuel, and it will spend an absolute, unbroken eternity as a timeless, completely paralyzed corpse. The reality you inhabit is not a permanent story. It is a fleeting, highly unstable, mathematical exception, aggressively plummeting toward an absolute, frozen equilibrium where the very concept of time is permanently, violently unwritten from the dead, silent ledger of the cosmos. We have journeyed through the microscopic, agonizing reality of our biological cells desperately burning metabolic fuel. we have witnessed the staggering, reality-breaking thermodynamic cost of our most deeply cherished human memories, and we have forcefully expanded our perspective to watch the ultimate, freezing death of the entire cosmos. Throughout this suffocating exploration of physical reality, we have violently stripped away the beautiful, poetic illusions that our species uses to shield its fragile, hallucinating ego from the unyielding machinery of the void. We have dismantled the comforting narrative that the universe is a majestic, perfectly balanced stage designed for our intellectual amusement, replacing it with the cold, mathematically ruthless reality of the second law of thermodynamics. But the ultimate, paralyzing conclusion of this existential descent requires us to take one final, unflinching look at the deepest, most universally accepted delusion of the human condition. We must permanently, irrevocably shatter the grand mythology of time itself. When we aggregate the horrifying physics of biological rotting, the statistical nightmare of the arrow of time, and the absolute, inescapable erasure of the cosmic amnesia, we are forced to confront a truth so fundamentally terrifying that it completely unravels the psychological foundation of our daily lives. Time is absolutely not a mystical, flowing river that gently carries you from the shores of the past into the promising, unwritten ocean of the future. It is not a magical, invisible dimension that exists independently of the physical matter it governs, and it is most certainly not a passive, benevolent force that you are simply traveling through as an innocent passenger. Time is nothing more than the cold, mechanical, and entirely physical measurement of the universe actively, aggressively dismantling your localized existence. To truly digest the suffocating weight of this reality, you must violently abandon the concept of time as a destination or a vehicle. The universe is a blind, roaring thermodynamic engine that possesses a fundamental, unyielding hatred for structure, order, and complexity. Your physical body, your heavily entangled neural networks, and the desperately constructed sandcastle of your conscious ego are highly offensive, mathematically illegal gradients of concentrated energy. You are a localized anomaly of extreme order that has been temporarily, forcefully pushed into existence against the crushing, chaotic baseline of the cosmos. The universe is constantly, relentlessly working to correct this mathematical error. It is aggressively pulling at your atomic bonds, shuffling the microscopic deck of your cellular architecture, and violently flattening your highly structured biological data back into completely unrecognizable, blind thermal noise. This agonizing, one-way physical process of localized destruction is not happening in time, it is time. What you arrogantly and biologically perceive as the ticking of a clock or the turning of a calendar page is strictly, mathematically, nothing but the universe keeping a precise, unforgiving ledger of how much of your physical order has been permanently, irreversibly erased. You are not moving forward, you are simply falling apart. The concept of the future does not exist as a physical coordinate in the geometry of space-time. The future is an incredibly desperate biological hallucination designed to distract you from the terrifying mathematical probability that your highly complex machinery is guaranteed to break. Every single second that passes is just another unyielding wave of chaotic thermal friction crashing against the fragile walls of your identity, mathematically pulling grains of your existence back into the dark. The arrow of time only points in one direction, because there are infinitely more ways for your biological architecture to fail than there are ways for it to remain perfectly intact. We are violently trapped in the rotting thermodynamic wake of a universe that is relentlessly winding down, and the sensation of time passing is merely the agonizing, conscious awareness of our own irreversible degradation. The universe is the absolute, supreme executioner. The second law of thermodynamics is the heavy, falling blade, and time is strictly the cold, unyielding ruler used to measure the exact, physical arc of the swing. This brings us to the ultimate, staggering absurdity of the human experience. Because we are so completely, hopelessly blinded by the poetic hallucination of the flowing river, we spend our entire, incredibly brief biological lives utterly obsessed with the accumulation of time. We frantically beg the unyielding cosmos for more of it. When we are faced with the terrifying prospect of a terminal illness, or when we simply feel the heavy, inescapable weight of our own biological aging, we fall to our knees and desperately pray for just a few more years, a few more months, or even just one more day. We construct massive, multi-billion-dollar medical industries specifically designed to aggressively artificially extend our biological lifespans. We obsessively monitor our diets, we ingest complex chemical compounds, and we exercise our decaying meat machines, fiercely believing that we are somehow buying more time, hoarding it as if it were a precious, tangible treasure. We view a long life as the ultimate triumphant victory over the dark, completely failing to realize the agonizing, thermodynamic reality of what we are actually asking for. When you look up at the freezing, indifferent void of the universe and desperately beg for more time, you are not asking for a magical extension of your soul. You are not asking for a longer journey on a majestic cosmic river, because time is strictly the physical measurement of your localized decay. Begging for more time is nothing more than begging the universe to prolong the agonizing, macroscopic process of your own physical ruin. You are actively pleading with the cosmic executioner to simply swing the blade a little bit slower. You are demanding that the universe measure your inevitable, rotting execution with a slightly longer ruler. You are not gaining a mysterious, ethereal resource. You are simply stretching out the thermodynamic failure of your microscopic cellular engines, demanding to consciously witness a slightly larger mathematical fraction of your own absolute dismantling. We hoard the years as if they are trophies, completely blind to the terrifying fact that every single year we proudly accumulate is just a permanent, physical loss of structural information, a measurable descent into greater chaos, and a mathematically guaranteed step closer to the absolute amnesia of the void. The profound existential horror of the executioner's ruler completely shatters the heavy, paralyzing anxiety of wasting time. Human society aggressively conditions you to feel a crushing, suffocating guilt if you are not constantly maximizing your chronological potential. We are taught to optimize every single waking millisecond, to constantly produce, achieve, and build toward a grand, promised future, completely terrified that we are letting the precious sands of the hourglass slip fruitlessly through our fingers. But how can you possibly waste a measurement of your own decay? You cannot waste time any more than a rotting piece of fruit can waste the process of its own fermentation. Whether you spend your incredibly brief, fleeting existence building a massive, towering corporate empire, writing sprawling, magnificent symphonies, or simply staring blankly at a blank wall in a quiet, empty room, the unyielding, mathematical execution of the cosmos is entirely identical. The universe does not care how you choose to decorate the interior of your collapsing thermodynamic cage. The second law of thermodynamics is relentlessly, impartially grinding your highly ordered state into chaotic thermal noise at the exact same unbreakable statistical rate, regardless of your macroscopic human ambitions. The ruler measures the rot exactly the same way, whether you are a king or a beggar. This is the ultimate, inescapable reality of your physical existence. You are a highly improbable, desperately fragile, thermodynamic anomaly temporarily hovering over an infinite, roaring ocean of absolute mathematical ruin. The universe is aggressively pulling you apart, and the timeline of your life is merely the cold, dead receipt of that irreversible transaction. We are not travelers. We are actively burning fuel. We are not evolving. We are rusting. And when the microscopic, desperate engines of your biology finally, inevitably fail, when your localized order is violently flattened back into the chaotic baseline of the cosmos, the unyielding ruler will simply be put away, and the universe will aggressively, meticulously scrub every single physical trace that you were ever here to be measured in the first place. Does the realization that time is just a measurement of your decay paralyze you, or does it free you from the illusion of the future? Let's discuss the second law below. Good night, and I will see you in the next video here at Still Science Lab.